All right, so we are ready to get started. Okay, in the last example, we talked about how to use Node.js as a server. We created this simple server application. Don't wait for a request. You see that request and you send back hello world. All right. I told you in the previous video, W3 School has excellent tutorials. Okay. And if you go to W3 School, there's a section, whole section about a Node.js tutorial. If you click on it, here it tells you what is Node.js. Remember that example that we talked about? Here's the example that we talked about. You can try it and tell you the steps to do it. Here is what is Node.js, okay? And tells you about what is Node.js. Getting started, how to get started. We did in the last tutorial, I got you to get started with that. Now the model, okay? Here is the response we talked about. You could have your own functions if you want. Okay. Here is another example where you require HTTP request, require this model. That again, if you have your own model, if you have your own code that you want to include, there's another way to do that. Here is how you can write. If you want to write multiple lines to the request, and you do rs end. Okay, so this is all similar to what we've done before. Here is that HTTP. All right, we talked about this part. Okay, this part again we talked about it. Let me explain this example a little bit more. This is again means that I'm writing okay. When I write head back to 200, it means I'm the request was handled with no problem. Rest dot write or response dot write. I'm writing one line here, and I'm done writing. So it will actually send the result back to the server. Okay, now. They are things that comes to you in the request. These two called request and write. And again, if you are familiar with the HTTP protocol, you should be familiar with these things. Request comes to me as a server. All the request comes from the browser to me as a request object. When I want to write back, I write back as a response. Okay. Now, this is not required by the course, but I think it's important that you understand them. So what we have here, we have request. What does request have in it? Request have in it, for example, the URL. What is the URL? URL is what? URL is the link that what you're trying to, the request that came from the browser. So if I do this, just to show you, command copy or control copy here. I go back in here to our server. Before the end, I do this, control V. Okay. And then I will write, okay, here is my end here, and I will run it now or save it. My server is still running, so I'm gonna control C and then run it again. Now, if I go to the browser, let's see what happens. And I call this localhost again, okay? If I do that, if I go to the localhost and hit enter, hello, do you see this here? Where does that come back from? That came back from the URL, okay? Now, if I type in ABC here, you got ABC. So that is where is that coming from? Or BAC? That is coming from the URL. Okay, so XYZ, BAC XYZ. Where is that coming from? The request has the URL. Okay, the request object has many other things. It has the parameters that you can send to it and all of that. And the node in the W3 school it has all these examples for you, how to read parameters from the example. Okay, so here's an example of what we did, right? Uh, uh, there is something called the query. What is query here? Okay, the query allow you to get the parameters that is being sent to you. What does that mean? Okay, I don't know if, see, do you see this here? This is the HTTP request to you, and then it would come, this is that first part. I can pass to it value to my server. How do you pass values to the server? You pass value to the server by putting the question mark first, year, and then what you want to pass. And then if you want to separate two values, you put the ampersand, month equal July. So now this request have two values, year and month. So in this example, you're doing HTTP require, and then URL is required. And here I have the same thing, but I added what? I want to get the query string. We call that the query string. And the query string has two values, year and month. Where did they come from? From these. This is my year and this is my month. Okay. Now you can copy this code exactly the same and put it in the JSON in Node.js, and it should work. It will give you this. This is important for later on. How do you pass value to the server? This is not any different than HTTP, normal HTTP requests. Okay. I'm going to stop here, but before I stop, I'll show you the other. You can go through this. This is a file system to read and write to a file. You can write HTML files, for example, here. You have an HTML file sitting on your server. You can serve this HTML file. You read the HTML file like that, and then you write it in here, okay? And then here's that URL model that we talked about, require URL model, and this is how you get the query string. We saw that earlier. NPM, we get to it later on when we start installing other packages, okay? So that is a start of what Node.js. Some of the important elements here in W3 schools. You can use these examples. I get you started in the previous videos. If you want to do more, you can go in here and do more. In the next videos, I'll start showing you to install MongoDB and how to use some of the commands in MongoDB, all right? And how to write some JavaScript code to read from MongoDB. All right, I hope you find these useful and help you with your coursework.